Yeah, I know the lighting is terrible, but it's November and this is a message I want to get out. So follow me on this, will you? If your Facebook feed looks anything like mine, you're seeing two things largely right now. French flags and people describing their fear of the Syrian refugees. And what I want to address is the fact that we're letting the terrorists accomplish their goals in ways that you haven't thought about. Right now there's a war going on in Syria that has more sides to it than the dungeon masters die. Hundreds of thousands of people are fleeing the country because who wants to be killed violently? Countries are taking these people in, and then the terrorists announce that they're going to put some of their people in with the refugees. Now think about that for a minute. Logically, wouldn't you want to sneak your people in with refugees? If your only goal is to get in and blow stuff up, there's easier ways of doing it. So what's the purpose of that? The purpose is to get the refugees rejected, because that accomplishes a whole lot for the terrorists. Number one, they have a whole bunch more people coming back who have nowhere to go but to them. Even if it means strapping on an explosive vest, it might be better than starving to death. More to the point, they will have made the West so terrified that they're willing to turn away widows and orphans. Islam claims its roots back to Abraham. And in all the Judeo-Christian religions that go back to Abraham, not taking care of widows and orphans is kind of a big deal. So they're trying to set us up for a major sin here. If they can make you so afraid that you're not willing to do things as basic as take care of widows and orphans, if they have filled your heart so much with fear that that's where you're at, then they have cut off your relationship with God. Because what is the most essential relationship with God? It's trust. It's faith. Is he Lord or is he not Lord? And if you can say, well, I think the terrorists are in control of what's going to happen, then they've gotten to you. They've won.
Don't believe them. Don't trust them. They're dying. Let them die.
Now you can say, well, Vince, what about Paris? And side note here for a moment, prayers and thoughts all to Paris. And side note here for a moment, of course, our prayers and our thoughts go to Paris and to all of France and to all of the victims of this horrific, horrific event in Paris. If you want to ask me what my thoughts are about how God is working in France during that event, when evil men are trying to destroy as many people as possible, and of course these comments speak to a person of faith, do you think that God was not present there? For those of you who are Christian, I mean, think about it. Jesus died a violent death. You think he has no compassion for events such as this? You think he doesn't understand horror or pain? I would say if you were there and you looked at the hands of anyone who was trying to help during that complete disaster, you would see the hands of God. And if you could look into the hearts of the victims as they're trying to recover now from this unbelievable, I don't even have words for this kind of thing. I mean, it's just we've overused horror so much. Horror is the only thing I could come up with. If you were to look into the hearts of those people as they were recovering from this, you would see the heart of God. His Spirit is in them, giving them the strength they need to get through it. And what can I say about the dead? A few years ago, a friend of mine was murdered. In a gun-free zone, I might add. By the only person allowed to have a gun in the gun-free zone. And of course, I went to the wake. And you go to the wake and you have to face her family. You have to face her children. You have to put something in the card. Oh, I'm so terribly sorry for your loss. No, that I need to do something better than that. And I prayed over it a lot. And what came to me to put in the card was roughly this. And this is some years ago, but I can still remember. I can still see the card. I put, in the time of danger, like any good parent, God came down and whisked his child away from the danger. And that's how you have to look at these things. That God just looks down and says, all right, no, you're coming home. This is it. No, you're not even dealing with this. You're coming home with me. I'm not going to let you suffer through this. Your purpose is done here on this world. You've done well. Come home. And for the people who survived, he says, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to be here with you through it. I will be in you. I will be through you, and we will do this together, and you will not be alone. It takes a tremendous amount of faith, a tremendous amount of trust to understand that. Especially if you're doing it. That is not the viewpoint the terrorists want you to have about this. They want you to feel powerless. They want you to feel alone. They want you to feel like the only thing you can do is isolate yourself because that's the only way you can stay safe. When you isolate yourself, when we isolate ourselves, they have more freedom to do whatever they want. Now, you might be looking at me like I'm crazy. And it is a crazy concept to say, well, let's let them in. The logical thing is, look, you know there's terrorists there. Why let them into the country? Which my counter to that is they can get into the country easily enough. Our borders are wide open. You're not losing out on this. What can you gain? Well, number one, you're doing the right thing. You're trying to take care of widows and orphans, at least some percentage of widows and orphans. You can show the world that their terror tactics are not working. That we're not going to change what we're going to do because they're making us afraid. That we're not going to let them change our essential spirit. What would an American do in this situation? Tom Clancy wrote a book about submarines. It's just called Submarine, I think. It was a nonfiction book. And one of the points he made was talking about minefields. And he said, how many mines do you need to make a minefield? The answer is none. You need a press release. All you have to say is there's mines there. And everyone has to treat it like it's a minefield. As long as they know you have the capability of deploying those mines when nobody knows it, it's a minefield. That's what we're dealing with here. Don't get me wrong. I know the pictures. 72% of the refugees for some reason are young men. Yeah, that's disturbing. And believe me, I thank God I'm not the person in the position of having to figure out whether I'd accept them or not. Because now you're talking about, do you have responsibility to the overall scope of the battle between terrorism and freedom versus taking care of your own people? This is not easy stuff. But where I live, and I think where you probably live if you're watching this video, is in that place where we really don't have a whole lot of say in where these refugees are going or if they're accepted. Heck, we probably won't even see any of them. And if you do, I hope you don't become prejudiced, because that's another goal. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. That's the whole path, and somewhere in there is prejudice. The main aspect of this whole thing, as far as my life and your life goes, is whether we're going to sit at home afraid of what's going to happen next. The world is what the world is. We're going to be dealing with this problem for a very long time. And the one thing we have to do is go to whatever source of courage you have, and for me it is Christ, and don't let yourself dwell on this where you're constantly thinking what's going to happen. Bad people have been out there for a very long time. And no, none of us knows the day or the hour that something horrible could happen to us. And that's true from a terrorist attack to a car accident. You can't live your life afraid. Well, I mean, you can, but it's a really bad idea. I say to you, turn to your faith or to whatever well of courage you have, even if it's just pure American stubbornness, to not let these people win and take away our peace. Just something to think about.